Hey there. Tonight we're stepping back in time into one of the darkest yet most defining chapters in human history. We're talking about the Black Death and what it truly felt like to live through that nightmare. But before we begin, take a second. If you enjoy these deep dive journeys through history, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always incredible seeing people tuning in from all corners of the world. All right, lights dimmed. Maybe a quiet hum from a fan in the background. Good. Let's settle in and travel back together. Congratulations. You've just woken up in Europe. The year is 1347. The morning air is cold and sharp as you blink your eyes open. You stretch out on your straw-stuffed mattress, feeling the rough fabric against your skin. There's no private bedroom here, not in this time. You share a single, cramped cottage with your whole family. The walls, they're made of wattle and daub, a wooden frame packed with a thick mix of mud, clay, and straw. It's not fancy, but it keeps out most of the chill. The thatched roof above you, well, that's another story. It leaks when the rains get heavy. As you stand, familiar smells hit you all at once. The smoky trace of last night's fire, the damp scent of earth beneath your feet, and the unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies. Bathing isn't exactly common here, but that's all right. No one minds, because everyone smells about the same. Your stomach growls. If you're fortunate, there's a bit of yesterday's bread left over. Though it's hard as stone by now, you dip it in ale to soften it. Yes, even the children drink ale. It's weak, but safer than water, which can make you dangerously ill if it's been drawn from the wrong place. Step outside, and the world is already awake. You hear the lowing of cattle in the fields, the cluck of chickens, and the voices of neighbors calling out to one another as they begin another long day's work. Most people here are peasants. Some rent small patches of land from the local lord. Others are serfs, tied to the soil they till. Life follows a steady rhythm. The sun marks your hours. Church bells measure your weeks. The seasons themselves chart the passing of years, planting, harvesting, resting, and beginning again. It's a hard life, but it's the only one you've ever known, and you have no idea that everything is about to change. A shadow is moving across Europe, silent, unstoppable, unseen. It will reshape the world in ways no war or famine ever has. The first rumors drift into your village, carried by a traveling merchant. He's the kind of man who brings strange goods from faraway lands, silk from the east, spices with scents you've never known. But this time, he carries something else. Stories, terrifying stories. He speaks of cities falling silent, of streets lined with the dead. A sickness, he says, that spreads like fire, bringing fever, painful swellings, and almost certain death. Some of your neighbors cross themselves and whisper prayers. Others scoff, waving it off as wild gossip. After all, tales tend to grow with each telling. The merchant moves on, his cart rattling away down the dirt road. And for a while, just a little while, life in your quiet village continues exactly as it always has, but the rumors don't fade. They only grow, louder, darker, and more terrifying with every passing month. By the time autumn arrives, whispers have turned into cries of panic. The sickness has reached the great ports of the Mediterranean. Messina, Marseille, Venice. Sailors tell of ships drifting into harbors, their decks silent, their crews long dead. Only corpses remain, rotting in the midday sun. God save us all, your mother murmurs when she hears the news, tracing the sign of the cross over her chest. In your small village, people begin to prepare, though no one truly knows what they are preparing for. Some stash away food and supplies. Others spend long hours inside the church, whispering desperate prayers for protection. The local healer starts mixing herbs and brewing strange concoctions. But deep down, everyone knows that nothing in her small collection of remedies can stop what's coming. The first cases reach your region as winter sets in. Snow covers the fields, and word spreads that a village just half a day's walk away has been struck. Several have already died. They say the victims burned with fever, their mouths parched from thirst, their bodies marked by dark swollen lumps in the armpits and groin. Most didn't survive more than 3 days. The elders of your village gather to decide what must be done. Some argue the roads should be closed. No travelers, no traders. Others insist life must go on. The crops, the markets, the church, they can't simply stop. In the end, nothing changes. People return to their daily work, though an uneasy silence lingers beneath every word. Then, one cold morning, it happens. A young man who works at the mill doesn't show up for his shift. When someone goes to check on him, they find him in his bed, drenched in sweat, trembling, his neck swollen with a dark, painful lump the size of a hen's egg. The plague has arrived in your village. What follows is a nightmare beyond anything you could have imagined. The sickness spreads like wildfire. One day, someone feels fine. The next, they're burning with fever. And by the third day, they're gone. The black swellings, or buboes, are agony beyond description. Some begin coughing blood, a sure sign the infection has reached their lungs. Those poor souls rarely last more than a day. People grasp for answers. It's God's punishment. Some cry, beating their backs bloody with whips in hopes of forgiveness. It's the air. Others insist, clutching small bundles of flowers to their noses, believing the sweet scent will drive away the foul, deadly mists. And some whisper that it's the Jews poisoning the wells. But your village has no Jewish families, and deep down, those words feel hollow, like fear twisting itself into hate. The truth, of course, is something no one in the 14th century could ever know. The Black Death is caused by a tiny bacterium, Yersinia pestis. It lives inside fleas, which ride on the backs of rats, those ever-present companions of medieval life. Rats travel on ships, scurry through grain stores, sneak beneath floorboards, unknowingly carrying death from port to port. When an infected flea bites a person, it spits the bacteria into the wound. The germs multiply fast, swelling the lymph nodes into those agonizing black lumps, the buboes. If the infection spreads to the lungs, it turns into pneumonic plague, the deadliest form. And now, the disease can pass directly from one person to another with a single cough or breath. But you know none of this. All you see is that people are dying. And nothing seems able to stop it. Your village, like thousands across Europe, is slowly consumed by the plague. The church bells that once rang joyfully each morning now toll endlessly for the dead, and when there are too many bodies to count, when death becomes too familiar to name, the bells finally fall silent. The dead are buried quickly now, with little ceremony, and even less comfort. Gone are the long, reverent funeral rites that once guided a soul from this world to the next. Now, bodies are gathered by the cartload, taken away by men who've grown numb to the sight of death. They're laid together in wide, shallow pits, one atop another, and covered over with earth. Some families have lost so many that no one remains to perform the burial. In those homes, the dead may lie for days, until neighbors or weary parish officials finally come to carry them away. Fear begins to reshape everything. People who once shared bread and laughter now avoid one another in silence. Doors are bolted shut to keep the sickness out. Those with healthy families refuse to open their homes to anyone. Others flee to the countryside, desperate to outrun the invisible terror that follows them. And then there are those who turn to faith, or what's left of it. They march through the streets barefoot, whipping their own backs bloody, begging for God's mercy, believing this plague is punishment for humanity's sins. But even the priests, the ones who should bring comfort, are dying in staggering numbers. Their sacred duty is to administer last rites. And in doing so, they come face to face with the dying again and again, until many fall ill themselves. Some abandon their parishes entirely, fleeing the villages they once vowed to protect. Those who stay often pay with their lives. Somehow, your family has been spared, for now. Though death circles your village like a hungry wolf, no one in your home has yet fallen ill. You've heard terrible stories of whole families wiped out in a single week, of children left orphaned only to die days later, of lovers separated by death mere hours after swearing eternal devotion. But deep down, you know your luck can't last forever. In a world where the Black Death kills between 1/3 and 1/2 of everyone it touches, no one is truly safe. One morning, your younger brother complains that he's not feeling well. By midday, he's burning with fever. By evening, the swelling appears on his neck. You don't need anyone to tell you what it means. The plague has found your door. Your mother refuses to leave his side. She cools his forehead with damp cloths, whispers prayers, and tries to coax him into drinking small sips of water or weak ale. Your father speaks of taking him to the monastery. But everyone knows the truth. The monks are overwhelmed, and many of them are dying too. For 3 long days, your brother's condition worsens. The swelling, the bubo, grows larger, darker, until it turns an angry black. His breathing becomes labored. He tosses and cries out, trapped between fever and delirium. You take turns watching over him, torn between fear and love. Every moment feels like it could be the last. Then, on the 4th day, something changes. While most victims slip away by this point, your brother's fever suddenly breaks. He's weak, terribly weak, but awake. The swelling remains, though softer now, and over the next few days, it ruptures and trains, a foul but hopeful sign. Against all odds, your brother had survived. You don't understand how or why. No one does. But centuries later, science would reveal a secret buried deep within human genes. A rare mutation called Delta 32. It alters a protein on the surface of white blood cells, known as CCR5, making it harder for the plague bacteria to invade the body. Your brother may carry this mutation, perhaps even others in your family. A small random twist of nature, a genetic shield, granting a few the strength to endure what so many could not. And in a strange turn of fate, scientists would one day discover that the same mutation protecting your brother from the Black Death also guards against another deadly disease. Centuries later, HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. The Black Death, in shaping who survived, did more than end lives. It quietly selected for those who carried a hidden genetic gift, a mutation that centuries later would protect some of their descendants from another deadly enemy, a disease that wouldn't even exist for more than 600 years. But that is a story for another night. For now, your family celebrates your brother's recovery as nothing short of a miracle. In a world drowning in despair, his survival feels like a spark of light, but not everyone is as lucky. As the weeks pass, the plague continues its grim work. Your once lively village of nearly 200 souls now counts fewer than 100. The fields lie abandoned, the harvest rotting in place. Those still alive are too weak, too busy caring for the sick or digging graves. Even the Lord who rules from the stone manor atop the hill has not been spared. He's lost his wife and 2 of his children. Wealth, titles, privilege, none of it can shield anyone from the Black Death. And yet, strangely, some people seem untouched. The village gravedigger, a coarse, greedy man known to steal from the dead, handles plague-ridden bodies every day, but shows no sign of illness. A midwife who moves tirelessly from house to house, tending the sick, remains perfectly healthy. Like your brother, they may carry the same rare genetic protection, but in this time, no one can imagine such a thing. Their survival is seen as either divine mercy or dark magic. As the months drag on, food grows scarce. With fields neglected and trade collapsing, the price of everything rises sharply. Even the simplest remedies, a pouch of herbs, a scrap of relic cloth, a drop of so-called holy water, now cost a fortune, and still none of it works. Then, as winter closes in, the plague begins to fade. Not because of prayer or medicine or human effort, but simply because the cold slows the fleas and the rats retreat to their nests. For the first time in months, there's hope. Fires burn in hearths again. People begin to speak of rebuilding. But the hope is fragile, because when spring returns, so does the plague. It comes back with the warmth, sweeping through towns and villages that thought they had been spared. And it will continue like this, wave after wave, for nearly 4 long years. From 1347 to 1351, the Black Death will claim somewhere between 75 and 200 million lives, wiping out nearly half of Europe's population. When the sickness finally loosens its grip, the world that remains is unrecognizable. The feudal order crumbles as labor becomes scarce and workers suddenly find their value rising. Power begins to shift, ever so slightly, from the nobility to the common people. The church, once unshakable, faces doubt and anger. How could so many faithful die while their priests fled or perished themselves? Old medical knowledge, rooted in superstition and ancient writings, is questioned. The plague's defiance of every known treatment forces people to rethink what they know, to look beyond faith and myth toward reason and observation. For those who live, people like your brother, the gravedigger, the midwife, life will never return to what it was. They are the survivors, the ones left to rebuild among the ruins. They will reshape their world, renegotiate their place within it, and slowly, unknowingly, begin laying the foundations of the modern age. But that is a story for tomorrow night. For now, as you lie back and let your eyes close, imagine yourself as one of those survivors. You've endured the unthinkable. The plague has passed, at least for now. Outside your cottage, the night air is cool. A dog barks in the distance. Leaves whisper softly in the breeze. And above, through the dark, The first stars begin to appear, silent witnesses to a world forever changed. You have lived through humanity's darkest hour, and though you don't yet know it, you stand at the edge of a new dawn. Born from the ashes of the old, despite everything, despite the unimaginable loss, the fear, the endless tolling of bells, life continues. And in that simple truth lies perhaps the greatest lesson of the Black Death, humanity's extraordinary ability to endure, to adapt, and somehow to carry on. The morning after your brother's miraculous recovery feels strange, a mixture of joy and something heavier you can't quite name. Relief washes over you, yes, but beneath it lingers an uncomfortable question. Why were you spared when so many others weren't? That quiet guilt, the feeling of surviving when others didn't, is something countless people in history have known. It's a ghost that follows the living long after the dead have been buried. Your brother is weak but awake. His eyes are clear for the first time in days. The lump on his neck has drained, leaving a deep, jagged scar that will mark him forever, a reminder of how close he came to death. But a scar, you think, is far better than a grave. Every day, he grows a little stronger, and every meal shared together feels like a small miracle. One evening, as your mother lights a rush candle against the darkening room, your brother asks softly, "Why did I live when so many died?" She pauses, the flame flickering in her eyes, and says, "God's will." But even as she speaks, her voice wavers, uncertain. The truth, of course, is far more complicated, something no one in the 14th century could ever comprehend. Throughout history, diseases have been silent architects of evolution. Each epidemic, each outbreak has tested humanity, and in doing so, shaped it. Those with small hidden advantages in their genes survive just a bit more often, passing those traits to their children, and over generations, those invisible differences become the line between life and death. The Black Death may be the most dramatic example of this in all of human history. Deep inside your brother's cells, and perhaps inside yours, lies a subtle genetic mutation that changes a tiny protein called CCR5, found on the surface of white blood cells. This mutation, known as Delta 32, shortens that protein, making it harder for the plague bacterium to invade and hijack the body's defenses. Some people carry one copy of the mutation, giving them partial resistance. A lucky few have two copies, and those are the ones most likely to survive. It's a genetic lottery, and your brother happened to hold a winning ticket. But the cost of that victory was measured in millions of lives lost. Every survivor stands atop the memory of those who didn't. Weeks later, your brother steps outside for the first time since his illness. He leans against the doorway, squinting into the sunlight. The world he sees is both familiar and utterly changed. Gardens once neat and tended now spill over with weeds. Empty homes line the lane, doors open, windows shattered. The steady rhythm of daily life, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the creak of the mill wheel, the chatter of the marketplace, has fallen silent, and yet, amid all that silence, signs of life begin to return. A small market is organized in the village square, smaller than before, yes, but filled with the determined hum of those who survived. Farmers bring what crops they managed to harvest. A traveling merchant, perhaps foolish, perhaps brave, arrives with salt, spices, and stories from the outside world. Everywhere, the story is the same: devastation, followed by the faint stirrings of recovery. No place has been spared. Cities, with their crowded streets and filthy water, have suffered the worst. Small villages tucked deep in the forests or high in the mountains have fared better. But even there, death has found a way in. In your region, half the people are gone. In some places, even more. The merchant tells of ghost towns where no one remains alive, of monasteries where every monk lies dead in his cell, of noble families wiped from existence, their grand estates standing empty and overgrown, and as you listen to his tales, you realize the world itself has changed forever. But the merchant doesn't bring only tales of sorrow. He also speaks of places where life somehow carries on, of villages where neighbors care for orphans and widows, where people share what little they have, and where kindness flickers stubbornly against the darkness. One story in particular stays with you. He tells of a woman named Elizabeth from a small village not so different from your own. In the span of a single week, she lost her husband and all 6 of her children to the plague. One by one, she carried their bodies up a hillside behind her home and buried them herself with her own hands. And yet, Elizabeth never became ill. Like your brother, and like the gravedigger back in your own village, she seemed untouched by the disease, as if protected by something unseen. What modern science will one day call genetic immunity was, in her time, a mystery beyond understanding. The merchant lowers his voice, glancing around even though no one is close enough to hear. They say she's a witch, he whispers. How else could she touch the dead and live? He shrugs. Some wanted to drown her in the pond, but most were just grateful someone was willing to bury their dead. Rumors like that are everywhere. In desperate times, survival itself can look suspicious. Those who live when others perish, especially women alone, or people with strange habits or uncommon looks, often find themselves accused of dark magic. Fear spreads faster than the plague itself, and superstition claims its own victims. Your father, who's been quietly listening to the merchant's tales, shakes his head firmly. There's no witchcraft in survival, he says. Some are just stronger against the sickness. Like my son, he places a hand on your brother's shoulder, a gesture of pride, of defiance against ignorance. The merchant nods politely, unwilling to argue with a paying customer. True enough, he says. In every village there are those the plague cannot touch. God's chosen, perhaps. As winter settles in, your village begins to adapt to its new, quieter rhythm. The air grows colder, the day is shorter. There are fewer mouths to feed now, a grim blessing in a way, but also fewer hands to gather wood, mend fences, and tend the animals. Every task takes longer. Every fire burns lower, but slowly, life reshapes itself. Your father, a skilled carpenter, finds himself busier than ever. Where once the lord of the manor could have simply ordered his service, now he must negotiate. He offered me a silver penny for 3 days' work, your father says one evening, still sounding half in disbelief. And a side of bacon. Your mother's eyes widen. A silver penny for just 3 days? He nods. Such pay would have been impossible before the plague. With so many craftsmen dead, those who remain discover their skills have suddenly become precious, and the same transformation ripples across every part of society. Farmhands, once dismissed as expendable, now name their own price. Household servants, especially those with experience running large estates, are in high demand. Even the humblest workers find themselves with choices they never had before. The great web of medieval life, the old order where nobles commanded and peasants obeyed, begins to shift. Quietly, almost invisibly, A new balance of power is taking shape. Women, too, begin to carve out new places for themselves in this changed world. Widows, who once would have rushed to remarry, now often choose another path. Independence. Many step into the roles their husbands left behind, running workshops, farms, or small trades on their own. Guild rules that once barred women from certain professions quietly loosen, not out of enlightenment, but out of desperation. In a nearby village, a blacksmith's widow shocks her neighbors by reopening her husband's forge. The sight of a woman hammering iron and shaping horseshoes scandalizes the traditionalists, yet no one complains for long. After all, someone has to keep the village's tools and plows in working order. For the serfs, peasants once bound by law to the land they worked, the plague brings something no one could have imagined: mobility. Across the countryside, desperate lords offer freedom and fair pay to anyone willing to stay until the soil. Others find they can simply leave. With so many dead, who's left to chase them down? Old systems of control begin to crumble, not with violence, but with quiet disuse. The great web of obligations that held medieval society together starts to fray at its edges. Of course, the feudal order doesn't vanish overnight. The castles still stand, the nobles still hold their titles. But the seeds of transformation have been sown, and in time, they will grow into something entirely new. Your own family, like so many others, adjusts to this reshaped world as best they can. Your brother regains his strength, though he tires more quickly than before. The scar at his neck remains, a dark reminder of his survival, but it has become a badge of endurance rather than fear. Your father's carpentry has never been in greater demand. He returns home with better pay than he ever dreamed of earning. Your mother takes in washing from the manor house. Hard work, but now it's work that finally pays fairly. And you find an unexpected opportunity of your own. The parish priest, one of the few who neither fled nor fell during the worst of the plague, needs help keeping church records, thanks to the reading and writing your mother once taught you back when she served in a noble household. You're the perfect choice. You never imagined that literacy, a small, quiet skill, would open doors that were once locked tight to someone of your birth. Then, as winter loosens its grip, spring returns, life begins to bloom again. Green shoots rise from the soil. Wildflowers scatter across the meadows. Birdsong fills the air once more. For the first time in what feels like forever, hope takes root. But that hope is fragile, because as the weather warms, the same conditions that bring life also stir death. By early summer, whispers begin. A cough here, a fever there. And soon it becomes clear the plague is back. This second wave isn't as merciless as the first. There are fewer people left to infect, and perhaps some among the survivors carry the strange resistance that saved your brother. Still, each new death reopens wounds that had barely begun to heal. Every tolling church bell feels heavier than the last, and though people try to live as before, an unspoken truth hangs over the land, that life, fragile and uncertain, can never again be taken for granted. And so, the story of the Black Death fades into the quiet of history, a time of unimaginable loss, but also of rebirth. From the ashes of despair rose a world forever changed, one that questioned old powers, redefined labor, and slowly, painfully, began to move toward the modern age. The plague took millions, but it also revealed something unbreakable within us, our will to endure, to adapt, and to hope, because even in humanity's darkest hours, life finds a way forward.